me hitting drug addiction, getting dark, fighting for everything, fighting for what I was taking away from myself with drugs.
Welcome to Fatherhood, Breaking the Toxic Cycle. Dive in as real dads bear all, the mess-ups, make-ups, and every heartfelt moment in between. Tune in. It's raw, it's real, and it might just change the way you see family.
Welcome to another edition of Fatherhood, Breaking the Toxic Cycle. And I have Jose here today, who's going to go ahead and share his story, his struggles, the wins, the losses, and how he's maneuvered through life with struggles and addiction and having his family torn apart, and how he's now looking to rebuild himself first, heal, and come back together. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Edward. Thank you.
So what I want to do is just kind of have you introduce people to who you are and kind of where you grew up at, and maybe you can start with a little bit of your childhood.
Sure. Yeah, I was born and raised in Mexico, but I lived between here and there. My grandma had us back and forth. She was, back in those days when I was little, she's always been afraid of earthquakes. And
Mhm.
and at that time, I had a cousin that was involved into the gang world, and it was very violent. We got to witness a couple of incidents there at the apartment with him because he would go and hide at our house. So all that was too much for my grandma.
What area was that?
In East LA, right there
East
in
LA,
Boyle Heights,
okay.
yeah. And so we would, when stuff like that would happen, she would get really scared. We would just pack and go back to Mexico. And so she had us like that back and forth. And that put a toll on me, because now that I'm, as old as I am, I can look back and see what that did to me. It threw me off, because we would get here, they would put me in school, and I would feel out of it. It was really hard for me to fit in. Then I'll start getting my rhythm here, and then we'll go back to Mexico, and had a hard time fitting in there. So it's like, I've always felt like I didn't have roots. So, I kept growing up like that, and like I was saying earlier, at 18,
Well, before you go there, let me ask you a question. So you right away went into your grandma. What about your mom and dad?
I don't know who my dad is.
Okay.
My mom, she was really young when she had me. She was 17, and for whatever reason, she dropped me, and my grandma kept me and raised me. It happened in Mexico. So my mom heads for the U.S. after my birth. My grandma says I was six months old when she left. So I grew up with grandma, and my mom, I didn't meet her till I was 3 years old. I was 3 when she went down there, and my grandma told me, like, this is your mom. And I remember, like, I was scared. It was, I remember this fear that I had, like, I probably was even crying too about fear, but I kept telling my grandma, like, you're my mom,
Mhm.
And when she told me that, no, she's your mom, with time, I kind of fell in love with her, and I was seeking her a lot. Like, I wanted her attention. I want to be with her. And she had her problems too, from, her young years, and her pushing back put a lot of wounds in me, because it was like every time she would do whatever she did to push me back, I know now I can see back, and it's like it was nothing but heartbreaks, you know. But as a kid, you don't cry, you don't process a heartbreak like we do now as an adults. Like, I've been through heartbreaks now, and it's like it was so different. But those heartbreaks build up, and they created wounds in there that I threw through the back of my head.
So that trauma. So your grandma exposed your mom to you, and then now you wanted to reach out to your mom for that affection, but then she wasn't in a place that she could accept it, so she pushed back.
Yeah,
And so there was heartbreak. And so
yeah,
that started a lot of, well, now you realize there was a lot of hurt and
yeah,
trauma and emptiness.
yes,
Is your mom still alive?
yeah, yeah. She's both. My grandma's alive as well. Um,
Do you
and
have a relationship with your mom now?
no, No,
Okay.
because of what I've been going through in addiction. I have to keep what hurts me outside.
Okay. Perfect.
So
Okay, so let's go to your childhood. So you're growing up with grandma. You don't, to this day, you still don't know who your dad is, right?
no,
Okay. So your mom's abandoned you. Can I say that word?
yeah,
Okay. So, and now you're left with grandma, and then grandma lives in East LA. And then when the uncles come around because they bring that gang violence, gets up and goes back to Mexico.
back to
Then she
Mexico.
comes back, and it's a cycle back and forth.
Hmm.
So you have no roots. You're struggling. I'm sure school's hard for you
Yeah,
going back. Tell me about, now, did you go to school in Mexico?
yeah,
Okay. So was there any bullying when you went back and forth in Mexico and even in the States
and
as
both,
you were going back and forth?
yeah, in both places.
Tell me about that.
Like here, I must have been now that I look back, I must have been a really insecure kid because the kids would peck at me, and I would just make a big deal out of it. So, and then first, every time we'd come back here, like my English would be like faded. So with all that, that would cause a lot of bullying. It would, both like verbal and what do you call it, physical. And when we would go back to Mexico, uh, because I didn't know certain words, there would also be bullying involved, and it was physical too. Something, what do you call it? I don't know. I don't know how to process that. It bothered me, but at the same time, it didn't, because I had my own traumas, other things more to worry about, even as a kid. So yeah, there was a lot of confusion. It created confusion in me, being back and forth in two different countries, two different cultures, two different languages, two different school systems, and I couldn't adapt myself to a place.
Is there anything your grandma could have done to help you adapt? Now looking back as an adult, that maybe would have made it easier because, you know, a family that crosses borders back and forth, that's actually pretty common in some parts of California, where they go back and
Yeah.
forth with their kids. And you're exposed to one school system, then to the other. And then sometimes you got into Mexico and they consider you a pocho, that you're not really Mexico. You not only are dealing with going back to another country, but then you're resented because you're from America. So there's a lot of discrimination that happens amongst the culture. But
Yeah.
is there something your grandma could have done to help ease the transition or?
We could have stayed in one place. We could have, because this time I came back to the U.S. We came back legal. I came back with the green card at 18 years old, and we land here. They brought me with lies. They told me, like, just you're getting a green card, which it was really nice when we went to the interview at the border in El Paso. They congratulated us and they offered us the U.S. as our home. They opened up the door, and it felt really nice. But I wasn't ready to come back. I had been in Mexico for 6 years straight, so I was adapted, and I had my own plans down there. I was in the process of joining the military down there, and that's something that my grandma never supported. So they brought me here to get me out of that idea of joining the military.
Of joining the military.
And they told me that we'll just go for 6 months, because you get a green card, you have to show that you're going to live in the U.S. for 6 months, or else they're going to disqualify you. So I believed that, and I came. 3 months later, they told me to go get my own apartment, and it's like I got lost. This is the touchy one. I got lost because I didn't know English very well, very good, or good enough. I didn't know finances. I was making at that time like $900 a month, and my actual mom, tells me, like, you got to go get your own house. She's like, she threw everything. You got to get your own toilet paper. You got to get your own beer. Which I'm not a drinker, but her husband would push me to drink with him, and at the end they're charging me for the beer, so I drank against my will. So like,
Wow.
it was real twisted, man. And
So wait a minute. Your stepdad would push you to drink, and then he would charge you for the beer that you drank.
the 3 months later, they did.
Wow.
Yeah. And till today, I'm not a drinker. So it just didn't make sense to me. The living.
Now, where was your grandma during this time?
During this time, when we came back this time, it was a struggle to find a place to stay. When I grew up with my grandma and her youngest daughter, which is my aunt. She's 14 years older than me, which I see her like a sister. It was us three growing up. She, when she came to the States, she stayed in 1991. And so she made her life here in the U.S. And this time when we came back, they couldn't have us together, my grandma and I. So my sister, my aunt, kept my grandma. She was renting a bedroom with this family in Whittier. And I ended up with my mom at her home. And that's where things went south, because it was a pride thing, man thing with her husband. So they tell me to go get my own place. I just couldn't. So I ended up in trouble. I met this guy at the job I had. He was affiliated in Long Beach. So like it happens, the welcoming was really nice. It was really nice. So I go with them and we start doing bad things.
So at 19, so yours didn't start at an early age. So yours started at 19 that you got affiliated.
Yeah. At 19, I was lost, man. Like I didn't know where to stay. So I was staying at my friend's house, and I was just back and forth. And then my sister ended up getting an apartment for me to move in with her. But at this point, I'm dealing with my mind being out of place. And yeah, that's how it went. My buddies went to pick me up to go to a party one time. And I remember one of the things that sold me to them was the union. They all showed up. All the cars and all the homies showed up to go pick me up. And they showed me the love because I didn't know English. And whenever someone would try to get, funny or whatever, the rest of them would put him in check. So it's like they, took me in really good. And then that day they showed up we were going to go to a party. They showed up to pick me up. And my mom, my grandma, and aunt, sister, came out and told them off. And that made them to drop me.
They dropped you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Everything that my sister told them, because of my cousin. I lost a cousin in 1994 to gang violence, and everybody took it really hard. He's the first one. My family is not very big, and we losing him. It put a stress on everyone. And I understand my aunt and my sister, like they were worried about me, but that only gave me more confusion because I'm like, I don't have a place. Like I found my brothers and now they don't want nothing to do with me because of everything that she told them.
Which in retrospect was kind of a good thing, because usually they don't oblige to someone. It's like, no, he's with us now. But out of respect for your grandma and your sister, they released you,
Yeah.
which is not the norm. So I know it caused things to spiral, but in that moment, now you had a chance to kind of save your life, so to speak.
Yes.
So you weren't going to go in that direction, but instead what happened is, by them trying to help you, things got worse. So they now turn their back on you, they leave, and what happens? So now you're left with no community anymore, no tribe, just your grandma and your sister, but nobody else. So what happens?
What happens is I dedicated myself to my job.
Okay.
And then my sister, to kind of help me cope with the loneliness. She felt bad because of what she did, but I know she was doing it for good. And it saved me, because at that age, at 19, I was really out to prove myself, and I could have ended up doing something I didn't have to do. And so my sister helped me to get a brand new truck, like helped me to get a toy to stay grounded. And we did. So I was really happy. I dedicated myself to work and still feeling lonely and empty. So I met my wife at work. She was a cashier. And 3 months later, we got married. And I was desperate to have a family. I was. I can see it now. I was in a hurry to have a wife and a kid. I wanted the home structure. Like I wanted it. Yeah. I moved in with her family when we first got married. Started having a life with her. But now I look back and it's like I didn't have character. We were together for 18 years. Our love was really strong. It kept us together. You know, we went through. We were both very dedicated to our marriage. We both behaved good. We didn't go out because when we got married, my wife was already pregnant of my daughter, and we had her, and there was nothing but joy. We were both really happy having a baby. So we lived that life of young parents. But me moving in with her parents, with her family, we were never able to break the ties with them. So they influence our life a lot. And I was 20 when we got married. At 30, 31, that's when I run into drugs. Yeah.
Before you go there, let me kind of back up a little bit. So your young parents, you haven't really experienced love from a mother or from your father, just
Yeah.
from your grandma and from your aunt. Now your wife, did she come from a little bit more stable background, or were there a lot of challenges in her?
It seemed like it to me at first because she had a complete family. They had a home.
Okay.
Um,
How did you guys know how to love your daughter that came into your life? Or
I
was it the family influence of her family that just
no,
kind of
no, it was like I've always had a lot of love. I always had a hard time expressing it and showing it because I'd always like, for whatever reason, no, I was been really hard like a rock. But no, love is there. So with my baby girl, she was everything. Like it was love, and my dedication to stay working. It was because I wanted to keep going with the family thing, and then we had our second one, and you know that was my thing.
So
Having
this
a
is
family.
interesting because there was a potential where you had the opportunity to go sideways at 19 and join a gang, and then the love of your grandma and your sister stopped it. So they removed themselves. You put yourself into work. You meet your partner who becomes your wife, and now you just dedicate yourself to work.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much living the American dream now.
Yes, it felt like it. I mean, that's all I ever wanted.
So you were just working. What kind of work were you doing?
I became a truck driver
Okay.
after we got married,
Okay.
trying to move up and make better money. And we were doing all right.
So you have daughter, and then the next baby comes when? A couple years later?
Yes, 2 years later.
Okay, 2 years later.
2 years later
Okay, and then you're living with your wife's family.
with the in-laws. Yeah, with
Okay.
the in-laws, we were renting a bedroom for at that time. It was really cheap for three. They were renting us out the room for $350.
Wow.
It was very doable, very easy.
Very hard to want to leave, huh? Other than
That made more sense than what my mom wanted me to do. Like when she told me to go get my own apartment, that the apartments at that time were $1,500. My $800 or $900 a month wouldn't add up to it. So me living with the in-laws for $350 and having a wife and a kid was a lot easier.
So then you're going through the next 10 years. Now, did your third child come during those 10 years?
During those 10, yes,
Okay.
my third child comes in Texas because when we got married, we lived 3 years in California.
Okay.
And then the in-laws came up with the idea of moving to Texas, selling the house just before recession.
Okay.
And we go to Texas. The in-law convinced me to go to Texas. And I helped him out with the move and everything. But once we got to Texas, it was a whole different economy. It is a whole different state. And I didn't have support there again. So that enslaved me to a low-paying job because when we get there, my insurance expired on the toy that my sister got me to compensate, for me getting out of trouble. And then my wife has a deadly accident. She had a head-on collision with this couple that were from Canada. They were in their honeymoon at the town where we moved, and their husband died in the wreck. And that brought in a tsunami of problems because my truck didn't have insurance. My sister
Mm-hmm.
co-signed me for it. And my
Mm-hmm.
sister, she's a realtor. My sister at that time, she had like a couple of properties she was holding on to, and they were suing her. And I had to keep on paying for the truck because I did not want it to, I wasn't going to do it to my sister without her credit. So I'm paying for the truck. I'm paying for rent where we're living in Texas. And, and I had to save up money because my sister had to get an international, attorney to get her out of the suit. And my sister was like, you got to pay for that. So it was like, I 100% agreed to it. It was just like economically, it squeezed me really bad. I didn't have a dime extra to spend for, man, the pickup truck I still had 3 more years to go on the pickup truck. I paid $700 for 3 years not having it and not being able to give me anything else. I
But
pushed
you,
through all that.
but you did the right thing. You did the right thing.
That was
You
it.
paid for the truck.
Yeah.
You paid for the attorneys.
Yeah.
Did that work itself out okay?
It did. Yeah. The attorneys got her out of the deal. At the end, we had court with the widow there in Texas. And she wanted $1 million, but she got $500,000 from the rental car insurance, and she wanted 500 from us, but we just didn't have it. And the judge dropped it right there, dismissed my wife, and that was very relieving because I was also fearing like, well, what if my wife goes to prison, and what am I going to do with the kids? Financially, I was really weak. I was just barely making it. Uh, it was nothing but fears, but God got involved and got us out of it. And when I got done paying for the truck, I got the title, and I was able to throw it away because I was struggling with it too. Nobody wanted it, and I couldn't have it anywhere. So it was like I was entrapped by all these issues, all these problems, man. And I was a young father, so
Do you ever look back on that experience? I'm sure in that moment and go, you know what? I'm not going to pay for this. I know it's under my sister's name, but I'm not going to pay for it. And I can't help you with the lawyer because I just don't have it. Did that ever cross your mind?
never. No, I couldn't let my sister down because let me go back to that with my sister, with my aunt and my grandma. They raised me with a lot of love. It was the love they had for me was so strong, really strong. But the structure wasn't there. Me as a man, I didn't get the men touch from anybody. So their love, it made me, the way I am. So, but I wasn't gonna do that to her. I love them, and my sister and my mom. Um, I wasn't gonna do that to her. She's single. She's always been struggling, but she's always been very disciplined on everything she does, and she co-signed me for the truck. Very happy. She was very very supportive on me getting a toy to keep my mind straight, and it worked. It really worked. I was happy with the truck. I felt really bad that the homies had to let me go, so I had to hold on to something, and it was that truck. And when my wife had that accident, I didn't really care for the materialistically for the truck
Wow.
because both my babies were in it.
They were.
Yeah, they were. Uh, I was too busy with it hit me like a train, everything, but they got to live. Everyone, my wife, and my two babies, they were little, and my wife had a nephew with her, which he wasn't wearing his seatbelt, so he flies out of the truck through the windshield at impact, and the truck flipped, and it flipped over him, so he was the one that had it really rough. So all that uh, made me, what do you call it? Made me
Grateful.
appreciate that they were all
Grateful.
good,
Yeah.
and that the pickup truck, I wasn't gonna let my sister down because how she helped me get it, the purpose of her helping me.
And this is powerful because the love of them kept your morals and ethics in place, wanting to do the right thing. But you also bring up an interesting point about not having a man in your life and how so many fathers choose not to be in their children's life because they're fighting with the mom. And that's something common that happens. And so then children have to suffer from it because their ego and masculine is so big that they won't connect with their kids because um, they want to try to hurt the mom or the mother of their children. So just hearing that, you crave that man attention, what it did for you, it left you lost and lonely and seeking out people that weren't, of a good influence to you.
Yeah, I would do that a lot, and I did that with my ex-father-in-law. Um, and he's been my biggest lesson. Uh, I'd I tried really hard, or I gave myself to him, and I, I'm not gonna get too much into detail on this, but he's been my biggest lesson. And not what you said right now about men fighting with the wife and pulling themselves outside their kids' life. Now that's me because of all the conflict I've had with my ex-wife, and me hitting drug addiction, getting dark, uh, fighting for everything, fighting for what I was taking away from myself with drugs. All the fighting with my wife, like I told you before, the property in Texas, it all put a toll on me, and it went down to my kids.
So you're going through your 20s and 30s and then living life in Texas, the accident happens. And when did the addiction start?
Addiction started with 12 years. Addiction started like 8 years later.
8 years later. Okay, so after the accident?
Yeah, way after.
Okay, so you have the accident, you get through that, now you're struggling financially, but you still have your family intact. You
Yeah.
guys are still together.
We're still together. Yeah.
And you're living life and you come through that and things are fine, right? I mean, of course, there's bumps along the way
Mhm.
with, living with your in-laws and so forth,
But we're together really strongly.
but you're
still.
together real strong.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
What happens is that the way I ended up getting out of my financial struggles, I was trying really hard. I just didn't have the connect, but I wanted to get into the oil field to generate more money, and it ended up happening. So I landed this really good job, and I made a profession out of it, an unofficial profession, that I ended up losing later on because of drugs. But we got out of the hole. But like I said, like they've been my biggest lesson because I shared what was supposed to be from me and my family. I shared it with everyone, and that's been my biggest dysfunction. So, and that's when the property deal came up, of getting the property and everything, and I just didn't handle it right. But that job got me out of my financial struggles. It did.
So it was and I won't go into too much detail, but just a property that you bought with the in-laws that went sideways, and that caused a rift in between your family with your wife now and with the in-laws, and so now you're in a place like, man, we worked so long to get out of this financial, hardship. I got into the oil industry. Now I'm making money, and now the money is like, it was almost like the money became evil because it now started the unraveling of your family.
Yeah.
And so this transaction goes south, and now you're in a dark place because you're now reverting back to when you were struggling financially.
Mhm.
And so tell me about so now the moment comes where you're in a dark place, and how does addiction come into the picture?
I was enjoying it at work because working in the oil rigs is hard labor. So the power trip was awesome. You could go days with no eating, days with no sleep, and then fine, just being a man, supposedly a man. And it was all good until it got dark. I remember the day when I got this sadness. I wasn't a good one.
You
But-
remember the day?
Yes, I remember the
Wow.
feeling. I remember the feeling when something inside told me you should quit, and I didn't. Soon after, I couldn't tell you how soon, but soon after, I get this other feeling that like you're done, you're stuck, and that came on me like with weight and darkness, and it brought me a lot of hate. Such a bad hate that me always being the person that had a lot of love, even though I entrapped it in myself, now I was dealing with this hate I couldn't deal with. It had me going crazy everywhere. And that's when I started putting myself into places I shouldn't have been. I would even go to Mexico and look for trouble down there. I was lost already as a married man, a grown man. And so, yeah, I ended up having a accident at work, and I was high, and I lost that job, and I almost lost an eye. This one is a miracle. Had a cement line exploded on me and another guy, and it got in my eye. Well, that cement burned me so bad that it created a blister in the cornea, big blister, and when it popped, the cornea was just there exposed. And even days after they washed it off at the hospital, the wound was still going. It was going deep. And I thank God for this eye doctor. She did a placenta implant, and that placenta is what generated my eye. And it's like it never happened. I lost vision on it. I don't see the same, but she healed it, like it's good.
Wow.
So I lost the job. I could have lost an eye, and now I lost a family. The drug really, I thought it was doing something good to me, because when I was on the power trip, it opened up my eyes to a lot of things. Like, it opened up my eyes to everything that was wrong around me in my life. Like people taking advantage of me. It made me see it. So I was so hungry. Come on, tell me more.
Mm.
And I destroyed myself with it. And a bunch of other things, but it just became dark. It became hell.
What was the addiction? What type of addiction to what type of drug?
To methamphetamine.
Methamphetamine, okay.
Methamphetamine, yeah.
And so now I'm assuming that you were using methamphetamine to keep those long hours at work
At first, yeah.
and to keep you up and days without eating because it's rough and it's the ego kicking in and it's what you do as a man.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was a point where it just got out of control and the accident exposed it.
Yeah.
And then how were you showing up at home for your kids, for your family? Like working these hard hours and then using drugs to kind of help you function to get through those long days. How were you showing up as a father?
At first, I wouldn't use when I would go home. My schedule at work was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I had 2 weeks off at the house with the kids. So at first, like I'm going to say like for the first 3 years, I wouldn't use at home. I would only use at work. But then later on, I started using my first week at home. And then I would use the second week to recover, because it would, it makes you look all messed up. And then I started using all the time. I wouldn't give myself time to recover. I became so hungry. I even wanted to eat it. It was so bad. It was really bad. I tried injecting, and that went wrong. I created myself some really bad wounds that, thank God, they're healed. But it was like I was desperate to put the stuff in me. And that's when I lost control of that. And with that, I lost control of my head. And here I am. It's been really hard to put my head in place.
How many years have you struggled with the addiction now?
It's been 10 now.
10 now.
10, and I've been trying to recover for the past 5. But it's like I'm learning little by little how to get out of it. I just couldn't stop, and that right there brought me a lot of shame. I felt different than everybody, and it wasn't until I started hitting recovery groups where I found out that there's other people that go through the same thing, and that relaxed me. And then I started getting more involved, getting education on it, and little by little, I've been just picking up as much as I can. Now I'm dealing with, like I told you earlier, like my way of thinking. I want to get out of it. Like I'm stuck. And I want to get out of it because I have 3 kids, and those things love me just like much as I love them. The love's still there. It's just with my oldest son, Daniel, he's in trouble now, like into the gangbanging. So he's already a young man. His pride gets in the way because I'm still in my pride too. And but I'm ready to get out of that. I don't need the pride. And so everything all at once.
What what could you what advice could you offer fathers right now that are struggling with addiction? Because your story is unique because your addiction started from working and trying to stay up those long hours. It wasn't from a place of not how I grew up or pain or not having a dad around. No, yours was because you used it to stay up because you're working on the oil rigs,
Yeah.
and then you were a functional addict, and then you lost control at some point. What would you offer, just what you've learned in your recovery groups or just in life at this point in your journey that could help a father that sees as that's struggling right now, that they're functional, but now they're eventually will get to a point where they're spiraling out of control.
Yeah. My advice to anybody that's got problem with a substance is we use for a reason. There's a reason why we use. Look into yourself.
Mm.
Get to know yourself. That has been hard to look at my mistakes because of pride, because it's like my life has always been hard. Like, why do I have to judge myself now? No, we do things wrong, and then we wind up trying to eat something. So look into yourself. If you're using something, if you have a problem with something, there's a reason why. There's a reason why, in many different ways.
And so now you've done different rehabs and so forth,
Yeah.
and you just finished one up just in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anyone that's really giving you like that strong inkling that like you're done? Like how many months has it been that you've been sober?
I've been sober since the beginning of April.
Okay.
This time, I don't know what it was, but I overdosed, and I dealt with it myself. I was renting his bedroom in Bloomington, and I had been sober for like 3 months, and then, like I said, my head got me, and I used really hard. I remember that my heart was giving me a hard time. I was going through palpitations for days. I would get up to go to the restroom, and just by me getting up, it just felt like it was going to stop. So here I am calling down, and then from the restroom back to bed, and that right there opened. And I also had a delirium this time, this hallucination that pointed something at me, and it was death.
Mm.
And I cannot forget that. I cannot forget that if I keep going, I'm going to die. This last time.
And so now you're a couple months sober, and how do you deal with the day-to-day now to continue to stay sober? Like, what's your why for staying sober?
I got to work on my head. I know there's more to life than the way I see it, and I want to experience happiness. I want to experience a beautiful life. This past rehab also helped me in some ways to help me to grab on from things in life and just grab on from life. I don't go through the rushes and triggers anymore like I used to. Cravings, I can deal with it. I can deal with cravings, right? Because I prefer happiness. Like this time after ceremony, I prefer this because I know I know how things go if I use. I'll rip it all apart, and then I'm tired of starting over. Every time I use, I send everything south. Then I got to go get it, and it's very tiring, very tiring. So I prefer happiness. I like to experience that.
So you mentioned ceremony. So you sat in ceremony with us just in the last week. And how's that experience for you?
I liked it. It the day after I was processing life differently, but it got me out of my control, like outside my control, which I normally don't trust. acting different than I am. And this time, I just let it be. And it was this feeling in my chest, like feeling awkward for letting go of control issues. I always had a hard time with what they taught me in rehabs: let go and let God. This time, I was like, "It's all you, God. It's okay. I
Mm.
trust Him." Bro, I love the happiness of it.
And you look a lot lighter. Look a lot lighter from when I first met you.
Really,
Yes.
it was a really good experience. Uh, yeah, the crying and all that. It was like it was awesome.
You know, I know you're having some challenges with your son right now as he's kind of stuck in that gang life, and you're having to kind of maneuver how to show up as a father. And it was great that you met Ruben in transition because I know he was able to share some wisdom
Hmm.
that you can take with you. Um, how are you showing up as a father these months? Like, so you've been sober a couple of months, and I'm sure when you weren't sober, there was a lot of chaos with your children and your well now ex-wife. How are they now processing that, dad's back? Like, yes, dad has a lot of work to do, but he's back.
This is touching my heart now because now my daughter tells me like now it tells me how she always felt when I would use just me just being there in bed, not getting up for days, and just using in bed, not eating and not drinking water. They were seeing their dad dying, and my daughter tells me now at that time at those times when I was like that, I would get annoyed by them getting near me. Just let me hear it, and even my wife would tell them like leave him alone because I wasn't processing it anything right. And now that when she tells me that, I'm like the pain I was giving them of them seeing their dad doing that to himself and them not being able to do anything for him. And when they did, I would push them away.
Mm.
So one of the things that I'm gonna tell you exactly what I what I saw from ceremony is the humbleness that it brought to me. I have a hard time being humble, and that other humility that I was feeling, it made me play around with my kids a lot. You know, like break out of the defensive, arrogant mode and just be a kid with them. So the relationship right now with my two kids is really good. This last few days, the oldest, I'm ready to see him. We've had a really bad fight before I left their house, and I was very resentful, and so was he. But I want to lead the way into maturity. So whatever it takes, I know I have to be a better father. My pride is in the way. Mm. Just right after ceremony, I felt the humbleness. I felt it. I was so fluent with everybody. Like there was no boundaries, no, no defensive walls.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, that was joy. That was joy that I haven't felt in a long time, years of my life. So yeah,
As we, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable because this is going to help a lot of fathers that are struggling with trying to get clean, or even they're clean now, but they're trying to hold on to. And one thing you said is, well, every time I start, I have to start all over again. I have to rebuild my relationships again. And you don't want to do that anymore. You want to experience happiness. You want to experience all that life has to offer, and your family. You've worked so hard, and yes, life's thrown you some curves, but now you're seeing the bigger picture, and it's that ego and that masculine that sometimes can get in the way. What parting thoughts or final words of advice would you give other fathers um, that are just trying to heal the relationship with their kids?
like don't be afraid of being vulnerable. Don't be afraid of putting your guard down. Um, it's like we have the wisdom. We blind ourselves because we're stuck on the addiction mode. The substances don't help. Substances only make everything worse. So that ego and that arrogance that comes with addiction uh, is better without it. It's a whole lot better without it.
You say ego and arrogance. What does that mean when you say that ego and arrogance that comes with addiction?
Selfishness.
Selfish.
It's like everything is going to be the way I think. Everything is going to be the way I say, and the way I do things is not the best way because of a substance. My mind is not where it should be. I already know that. So that's what, like when I was saying earlier, every time I have to start over. I destroy my head every time I use. So me trying to work, I have to work really hard to come back to be the person who I am every time I use. So that gets tiring, and because you feel what you've done wrong, you feel like everybody's against you, and that's when you build up that arrogance, self-centeredness. And so my advice to fathers out there is look into humbling yourselves. I'm not there 100%, but that's what I want. I don't want this pride. I want to be able to talk to my son more than anything, with the maturity.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. That was very strong.
Thank you.
And another episode of Fatherhood, Breaking the Toxic Cycle, and Jose's story from the beginning where he struggled with trying to find an identity, trying to find a tribe, and then he found it and it was lost. And then his redemption from fatherhood to addiction, and now coming full circle back to fatherhood. Thank you.
Thank you for the space, Edward.
Whew.